if someone grew up being shamed for expressing their emotions, that's a repressed part of me. I feel like, oh, I can't express my emotions. It's not safe to. If I do, I'm going to be shamed for being expressive. And so I go forward into my life, not really being able to be vulnerable. If someone else is expressing deep, uncomfortable emotions, I'm going to deflect them because it's something that's repressed in me. So I'm going to always attract somebody that is very emotionally expressive, that wants to emotionally connect with me. And initially, I'll find that really exciting. I'll be like feeling like somebody, like I'm finally being able to express myself. But there'll come a point in the power struggle where it starts to become too intimate. They're asking too much of me. I start to hit my growth edge, my limiting beliefs. In that moment, I'll have the opportunity to choose, this is where I can step into relationship with them and start to liberate my own repression, start to become more expressive, because this is what they're asking from me. This is what they're wanting from me.
Yeah! What's up, everybody? Your life alchemist, your dragon. Welcome to Alchemized Life. I'm your host, Justin David Carl. This is a show where I seek out and share expertise, wisdom, and thought leadership in all domains with the mission of empowering and inspiring you to proactively design and truly live a life worth living. We're all in this together, and when we do the work together, we go so much farther, so much faster, and have so much more fun. Without further ado, let's dig into this episode and alchemize life. Leo Cheung, such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Very happy to be here, Justin.
To give the audience an idea of how special you are to my life and this podcast, about a year ago, I started working with you with the main goal to launch a podcast, this very podcast. So I'm incredibly excited, grateful, and just in reverence of the relationship that we have and the work that we've done together that has empowered me to bring this podcast dream alive. So to give a short intro of who you are in the world currently, the current iteration or evolution, you're a breakthrough coach. Specifically in this case, you are my breakthrough coach. You're a life coach, an EFT practitioner, and you are most known in the world actually for your breakup and recovery coaching. In addition, you're a men's group facilitator and much, much more. So really excited to dig into your story as well as your work with me to really, kind of unpack what we've done together and then what you do in the world that empowers people to kind of unlock and unleash their best selves. So let's take it back to the start. I always really love to kind of understand people's origin story, both from the kind of entrepreneurial side, but also from the healing side. So how did you get to where you are now as a coach and a healer and someone who really acts as a catalyst for others in their own life journey?
Yeah, I would love to tell that story. But before I do that, I'm practicing appreciating and acknowledging people. So in the same way you acknowledge me, I want to acknowledge you. Before jumping on this podcast, I was thinking a little bit about our journey together. And it's crazy to think that it was about a year ago that you started working with me. And it's also funny to now be part of what you've manifested and me helping you manifest. And now I'm on your podcast. So just want to acknowledge you for trusting me and committing to this process and seeing all the way through and continuing on. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey with you. And so I'll tell a little bit about how I got here. Before all of this, I was teaching yoga. I was a yoga teacher in Vancouver and teaching for about 8 years and doing that full time. And there was a point where I was in a relationship during that time. And it's one of my first most significant relationships where I really, really would consider being in love and being in a relationship that really fulfilled me. And I won't go into too much of the details, but it didn't end well. And it was really difficult for me at that time to try to understand what was happening and grieve the breakup that I was experiencing. And at the same time, being in the very front of the room teaching yoga and holding this very vulnerable experience, but not knowing how I could be with it while still holding space for other people. So I found myself burning out, and I thought I burnt out because of the work that I was doing. I wasn't making the kind of money I wanted to. I was running all around town, doing trainings, and feeling like I wasn't really getting anywhere with all of that. And I thought, I want to quit teaching yoga because of that reason. But it wasn't until many years later did I realize that I was emotionally burnt out. I was grieving something that I didn't know I was grieving, and just knew I needed a break from being in front of the room and pushing myself. And so I just went 180. I left teaching yoga, and I said, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that that was my life purpose, and I wanted to find something different. And so I just went for the very thing that I never thought I would do, and is completely opposite to teaching yoga, which is selling cars. Yeah.
Okay, real quick.
Okay.
What age were you when you started teaching yoga?
I started when I was 24.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you did that for 8 years. And at the kind of end of that 8 years of yoga is when the breakup happened. Is that correct? So you're around 32.
The timeline is a little different. Actually, I think I maybe started around 22, 23. I had a breakup around maybe 27, 28. I taught for another maybe year after the breakup. And then I just couldn't do it anymore. And then I asked my brother-in-law, hey, do you have a job for me? I just want to get out. I don't know what the next step is for me, but I want to do something that's completely different, that's going to challenge me. I wanted to be in a more masculine environment because teaching yoga for me was in a very feminine environment. And at that time, I was deep in men's work as well, as I was talking with you about before, and wanted to nurture that part of me, that growth, and do things that were really uncomfortable. So, yeah, does that help with the timeline?
Yeah. Let's talk about selling cars, because that is so radically different. It's crazy.
I know, and I don't really even remember what was going through my mind at that time. I was just desperate and willing to take some risks to see if something would shift in my life. But I sold cars for about 6 months, and I actually did very well. I was not the top salesperson, but usually the second or third sales in terms of sales. And whenever you talk about your journey with sales, I'm like, oh, I remember those days of hustling and closing and negotiating. And yeah, it was tough. It was one of the hardest things I've done, like in terms of work. And even just in the third month, I remember getting shingles from the stress that I had from working.
You and I share that. I actually got shingles during a super stressful part of my life. And just for the audience, note, it's very rare for younger people to get shingles, except in the circumstances where they're incredibly stressed out. So it's interesting that, and we're going to have to circle back to that topic, but about how the body kind of manifests these signals that something needs to change.
Yeah, it told me early on, but I didn't really understand my body that well at that time. I was really ignoring it and kept doing it for another 3 months. And then I had a really good month, made a lot of money, and said, oh, okay, I need a vacation. I'm going to go to Montreal, go spend a few days there on my own, just enjoying life there. I had a great time, but the very last day I was in a cafe 2 hours before my flight, and I was like going back to the very start of the month. And the start of the month when you sell cars is when you're at zero, and you have to get to like whatever, 15 cars, 20 cars. And the thought of having to start that all over again was just too much. I was like, I can't do this again. I just can't. When I got back, I just put in my notice and said, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. And I really listened to what I actually wanted to do, which is to learn carpentry.
Yes.
And I wanted to build tiny homes. I wanted to live in a tiny home. Kind of wanted to live that alternative lifestyle of being off grid and being in a cabin, that type of thing. But I also recognized that teaching yoga was a very abstract, transient form of creation, as in you create a class, and then once the class is complete, it's done. There's not a manifested product or thing that I can say I've made with my hands. I can see it in front of me. And that's one of the journeys I wanted to go on, was learning how to use my hands and make things. And that's what prompted me to become, I wouldn't call myself a carpenter, but learn carpentry. And prior to that, I had no experience with any of that. It was a really, really steep learning curve. So I did about 10 weeks of like introductory carpentry, and then started working for a company. And I thought right away when I was gonna work for a company that someone would mentor me and I'd just be under their wing and they'd teach me everything. But I ended up not learning very much for the first year, doing a lot of dump runs, picking up garbage, just a lot of the bitch work that a lot of green carpenters have to do and kind of earn their way up. But my nature is I'm ambitious. I like to learn now. I want it all now, and essentially to pursue my vision and dream of being able to build my own tiny house. And I wasn't getting there fast enough, so I was certainly frustrated. So I jumped around from different companies to try to find the one that would actually teach me something. And I eventually got back into another relationship. I moved back to Victoria. Or not back to Victoria, I moved to Victoria, which is a small town on Vancouver Island. And that's where my partner at the time was living, and was doing carpentry there as well. And over the pandemic, I was already a little bit sick and tired of doing carpentry because I still wasn't learning very much. And over the pandemic, I was doing this training called Emotional Freedom Techniques. And you know about this. So I've jumped ahead a little bit, but my partner at the time, she'd found out about this program called Emotional Freedom Techniques, and somehow we had talked about it a little bit here and there. And I'd done a workshop on emotional freedom techniques at a festival Base Coast. And they were talking about manifesting money and using tapping as a way of having a more abundant life. And I was at a festival. I wasn't really dropped into anything like deep and profound. And so I left that workshop not really feeling like there was really much impact on me. But for some reason, it planted a seed. So when my partners said that, hey, you should check out this workshop, they're running this program, I was like, sure, why not? Like, I'll check out this workshop. I'm sure it's a great like intro to what EFT is about. And this was in Vancouver, and so I went to this workshop. And the first day I sit down and they're talking about EFT, and already they're talking about how to work with clients. So like, this is what you say, this is what you do when you're working with clients. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. Like, I didn't come here. Like, this is not what I signed up for. I thought I was just learning about EFT and applying it for myself and take it home and learn about it. So I was a little confused and like kind of doubting why I was even there, because it was a 3-day workshop. And I stayed and went anyways. And day 2, this light bulb came on because I was trying to find out, well, what do I want to do with my life? Because it's not carpentry. I've done it for almost 3 years, and I don't see a future in it. That was that moment where I felt this gut instinct that, Leo, you can be a practitioner. You can be a coach. And this is why you're here. And when I made that internal decision, then I had a whole other lens when I was at that workshop, and learned a lot actually about my own process. I learned a lot about trauma. I learned about the nervous system, about listening to the body, about emotions. And that was a really big wake-up call for me, because I'd heard about a lot of these things, but I never really understood it, and I never applied it to my own personal journey. So that was also the beginnings of another stage of my spiritual journey with myself, because I'd lost myself during that time when I was selling cars and doing carpentry.
Yeah.
And so this was me coming back to myself. And so during the pandemic, I stopped doing carpentry because it was slowing down in the beginning. And I said, okay, great. This is an awesome time to transition. And that's where I fast-tracked my certification and was certified under a year as a practitioner, and then started coaching. And that was a lot of the journey of how I became a coach, and why I'm also talking to you now and was a coach with you.
Yeah, so a couple questions about that journey. When you were younger, did you ever have an inkling that you did want to coach and work with people? Or was this something that you awakened to kind of, during the latter part of the carpentry journey?
The carpentry is part of my dream as a child. I played with a lot of Lego, and I would do that for hours in my room. And I thought, usually when someone asks, when someone is looking for their purpose or what they want to do in life, you're prompted to look at, okay, what did you do when you were a child? And so I asked myself that. And I built a lot of things with Lego, and I thought, oh, I'll be an architect. That's what I wanted to do actually in university, but I never followed that. And then there was a time where I wanted to do interior design, and applied and made a portfolio and never followed through with that. So carpentry was that last attempt at trying to live out my dream. And I did do that. I built a van, which was not a tiny home, but it was actually what I wanted more, which is to build a camper van. But being a coach was something I actually resisted and didn't want to do before I did my EFT training. A lot of my friends are life coaches or relationship coaches. And I had a lot of judgment about coaches at that time, about their integrity, about their validity as a coach, and was a lot of my own projections of not understanding what coaching actually is, about my own self-doubt and my ability to have impact on other people, and also just probably somewhere deep inside of me knowing that this is my life calling, but fearful of stepping into that responsibility.
Yeah.
So I think that it's also a part of my healing journey. It was for me when I was a yoga teacher. Being a yoga teacher was another thing I needed to step into, to grow into, because I was very timid.
Yeah.
Very introverted.
Yeah.
Had a lot of social anxiety before being a yoga teacher. And so that path taught me how to be relatable, how to be in front of a room and project my voice, use my voice, be expressive in the world. And I think this is another part of that journey. And me specifically, it's the journey of relationships and breakups, which is why I'm a breakup recovery coach. And so I also think that for me, any career or life purpose that I choose has to do with my own personal journey and what I need to grow into and heal. So I never dreamed of being a coach or thought that I just want to be like Tony Robbins, or I just want to be like X, so and so. It just sort of fell in my lap and never really consciously chose it.
Yeah, so a few reflections. One, it's really interesting, before I got to where I'm at in my life, I went through yoga teacher training and taught yoga for a short period of time at Stanford University. And that was kind of, I would say, my first major kind of role as a teacher. And I dabbled in it, but then quickly kind of I was also doing the sales thing at a Stanford startup and kind of was like, whoa, there's way more money in this. I need to like really focus on this. And then obviously the sales career, alignment there, although mine's been much longer. And I think there's a part of me that just loves it, and probably in one shape or form will always do it. And that kind of ties back to my own kind of like thing, or kind of like things I did as a kid, which I used to make things and take them to school and sell them, which is hilarious. So one of the things I'm kind of curious about, because you mentioned it, and I think at one point I shared some similar views, is kind of your judging or or misconception of coaches. And this could be a reflection of literally my own stuff. But what I heard in that when you brought that up is like, how the hell can somebody be a coach when their life is so fucked up? Or they have so many problems that they haven't dealt with. So because I know that's like something I've thought of, like, oh, you're a life coach? Jesus, like, how are you coaching other people when you're like, going through your own challenges? So I'm curious if you had some sort of similar views at the time that have evolved. And then kind of related to this, you brought up earlier in the conversation this ability to hold space for others during your own personal challenge. And you had to do this at first in yoga, right? You went through this breakup and you had to continue to teach when you were like, I am hurting right now. And so for me, I'm just curious about those kind of preconceptions about coaching. And then also a really important topic to me that is very relevant in my own career is like, how do you hold space for others when you're going through your own stuff? Like that could be particularly painful or challenging, whether that's with a family member or a health issue or a breakup. So I know it's kind of like a 2-in-1, but I'm just kind of curious first about that kind of coaching misconceptions or preconceptions or judgment, and then B, the ability to hold space for others when you're going through your own stuff.
Yeah. What came to mind was, now looking back, the difference between holding space when I was a yoga teacher and holding space now as a coach is that I couldn't hold space when I was a yoga teacher because I wasn't actively recovering in my own journey. And so mostly because I didn't even know what I was experiencing and what I needed to do at that time. I didn't have the awareness. And so because I wasn't actively recovering and doing something about my situation, I felt like holding space and teaching was taking away was requiring me to expend energy that I didn't have. Whereas now, because I have, from a logistical standpoint, I have a lot of support with my own therapist, my own coaches, with my own community and network, but also that I am actively on a spiritual journey myself of knowing who I am, continually grieving, whether I'm actually feeling, let's say, sadness, anger, any of those things. I'm continually grieving, as in I'm continually letting go and also surrendering to something greater than myself. Now that I'm on that journey, I feel like when I am holding space, even when I'm going through something tough, I'm not expending energy, but connecting to somebody else's journey as well. Because I'm also on that journey as well. So in that connection, I actually get something back when I'm giving energy to hold space. So it's certainly, there's days where I do feel low if I am going through something tough. I'm not actively experiencing anything challenging at this moment, but certainly last year was a really, really difficult year where there's those days that I have to muster everything that I have for that 1 hour. But when I'm in that hour, I'm in a different place altogether. And something important that I learned from my men's group mentor is that there's this act of just putting on the leadership hat. And when I have that hat on, it's no longer Leo, the personality, that is showing up. It's the role of the leader or role of the coach that shows up. And I'm channeling something through that role, as opposed to Leo as the person or the personality having to show up. And so the Leo that's grieving or the Leo that's hurting can just sit next to me or be in the other room, and I'll tend to him later. But right now, the leader needs to show up.
That's really powerful. You were a few years ahead of me kind of in coaching. You know, for any new audience members, I also have a coaching program that I got off the ground also with the help of Leo. So, and if it weren't for Leo and one other significant person who will be coming on the show, in addition to my wife, I would have easily self-sabotaged myself from ever becoming a coach, just because I had tried and failed about 5 or 6 years previously, never got it off the ground. So what I'm realizing in my own coaching journey right now is learning to hold that space for clients. And, I do both one-on-one coaching and group coaching. And sometimes, like you mentioned, like my energy is feeling fairly depleted. And I've had thoughts, I'd be lying if I said I didn't, like, is this like what I'm meant to do? Because like this is exhausting. And when you said expend energy that you don't have, I was like, oh God, I know what he's talking about. So I'm literally feel like I'm in the middle of that, where I've never felt like I'm doing such deeply meaningful and impactful work, like work that I'm so proud of. Because when I witness these transformations my clients are going through, and they're the ones doing the work, I'm just acting as a catalyst or creating a space for their own transformation, but they're doing it. But like just being a part of that process is so incredibly rewarding that I'm like, yes, I can do this. But then there's times when I'm just like dealing with my own shit in my own life, and I'm like, I don't know if I have the energy for that. And I would say in the last 7 or 8 months since I've started my own coaching program, my own ability to kind of recharge and renew, or what you said, actively recover, is being put to the test seriously, because I feel like you said, like, or similar to what you said, that I'm like giving so much energy, and I'm still learning how to find the balance or the kind of active recovery, processes and tools and systems that will keep myself, in, good energy and good health. Like I'm literally feel like I'm in the middle of it. So I'm just kind of curious, what are some of the things that you had to learn in your own kind of actively recovering process of being able to continuously hold space for clients as you go through different waves? Like you mentioned, right now you're not going through anything particularly challenging, but you mentioned that at times you did, and you're like, I don't know if I have the energy for this. So I'm just curious, in your own practice, what are some of the things that you do in order to actively recover?
Yeah, when I say recovery, it is for those that are looking at it from a breakup lens, is recovering from the breakup, but from a higher perspective than just breakups. It's recovering our authentic selves. Remember when I showed you that model of those two sides? It's like trying to come back to the place from trying to strive to become our ideal self to returning and recovering our authentic self, which is the self that we come into this world with, which is our infinite potential.
Mm-hmm.
And so something I'm trying to constantly remind myself is that I'm showing up as a human being when I'm coaching, and to not try to pretend that I have challenges or setbacks or hardships in life. I think that's one of the things around coaching that I had misinterpretations about, was that coaches need to be a certain way or have achieved a certain thing in their life and be a particular ideal or model for somebody. It could be difficult for me if I hold myself to that standard. That's, I think, the thing that tires me out, is if I have to be a certain way when I show up. Right. And then that also translates into my coaching, because I think that then the person I'm coaching has to be a certain way. That, how come they haven't reached their goal? How come they haven't reached their outcome? Well, it must be something about me as a coach. I'm not doing enough, right? I'm not carrying them on my back enough and working hard enough. So I think it all comes full circle, that if I am continually practicing and learning to recover my own authentic self and discover what that is, then I will also allow somebody to do that with themselves too. Does that make sense?
100%. So I definitely want to put that diagram, a link to it in the show notes. So I'll have to get that from you again. And then secondly, to get a little bit more like tactical, like what are some of the things that you do in your own life to recover that authentic self?
Well, currently, it's the path of relationship. And it does sound a little abstract. I'm like, okay, well, what's the day-to-day morning routine or thing that you actually do? But for me, it's more of a lens of looking at life and approaching life. The thing I'm practicing right now is staying in relationship and fostering relationships that help me awaken as a person. So I call this conscious relationship, whether it's with an intimate partner or just a friend or even a coworker, of learning how to use relationship as a vehicle for my own personal growth. So, for example, in my dating life right now, one of the things that I need to recover and come back into my authentic self is learning how to play, be spontaneous, laugh. Those are all, ironically, difficult things for me. Most people would think, oh, well, it's having fun. Go and do X, Y, Z. How hard can it be to relax? But actually relaxing and truly feeling joy through the act of playing is difficult, because I didn't experience a lot of that growing up. And so by actually doing that in my relationships, for example, the other day I was working and it's midday, and one of the people that I'm dating, she's like, oh, let's go for a walk. And then we walk by some swings, and she's like, oh, let's go play on the swings. And in my head, I'm like, that's the last thing I want to do right now. I'm mid-work day, all these things are happening in my head right now. I just want to get back to work, and you want me to go play on the swings and act like a child, essentially. And I knew that that's what I actually need to practice right now, is relaxing, surrendering to being playful and fun. And that is what's going to feed my recovery process. That's what's going to feed me in my journey, which then also feeds the way in which I hold space for clients.
Yeah. That's incredibly powerful in the sense that, from my perspective, what you are doing is you are seeing that everything that is showing up in your life is actual potential energy that can be used to do your own learning, healing, growth, and transformation. So instead of resisting whatever's coming up, like the swings, you're like, I feel the resistance. Here's one of my growth opportunities.
Yes.
Am I going to lean into it, or am I going to continue to resist it so that it continues to persist as a challenging area in my life?
Yeah. And it first starts with even just having the awareness that this is something I need to work on. And then to be able to recognize those moments in life where that opportunity arises, and then choosing to step into that opportunity and stretch into my potential.
Yeah. So there's another part that you touched on that is incredibly relevant for me right now, in my own coaching journey as a coach. And that is basically, if the client is not achieving the goal or the transformation in the, time that for whatever reason I thought it should, I, like you said, take it personal. Like, not all the times, but I'm noticing myself, I'm going in and out of this, if I was doing a better job, if Coach Dragon was doing a better job or was a better coach, they would be having their transformation or breakthrough versus kind of being where they're at. So I'm curious, how do you free yourself from the impossibility of that? Because that is just like, in my own experience, is like, it's their journey. It's not mine. And again, I can be that catalyst or create that, space for learning and transformation, but ultimately they're going to take their own journey.
Yeah, when I notice that I am having a struggle, or noticing that I'm like not wanting to be on that call, it's often has to do with something within myself. So like, for example, when we've worked together, there certainly has been periods where I'm like, Justin's not doing his homework, or like he's not using EFT the way that EFT is supposed to be done. And that is a function of me trying to fix and change you. And I'm getting lazy and complacent in my coaching, because I just want to use the same tool that I've used and not really evolve and listen to what's arising in you. So rather than listening, I just already have a pre-planned agenda of this is how it should go, and not really being present in the moment to responding to what's happening. And therefore, then I'm not really in relationship to you. And so I really have to be aware of when I'm trying to fix and change you, and instead listen to also what's arising in me. Because often the tools that I already have, I'm just not employing because I am not actively listening to what needs to come forward. And that's often because I'm actually not listening to you and what it is that you're experiencing. So I don't really have an active tool or thing that I do to ensure that I don't do that. I just have to really, again, come back to my own journey and notice, okay, why do I have resistance? Or why do I have frustration when I'm meeting this client right now? Or why do I feel apathetic? And usually it's for that reason, is that being present and responding is a really challenging and difficult thing to do. And it's also why I'm doing this. I'm just meeting another growth edge in my coaching, just like the client is meeting their growth edge. And so we're both bumping up against this growth edge. It just takes a little more patience and dedication to get over that edge so that we have the breakthrough that we all want. We just can't grasp for it.
Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. Today's show is brought to you by Veg Nutrition. Live better. So I'm actually a Veg elite athlete, and before I joined the team, I spent months doing my due diligence to make sure that the company was vision, mission, and value aligned with me, my values, my mission, my vision, and my lifestyle. I got to know the owners super well. I even got to know the person who formulates all the products, and they passed with flying colors. So I couldn't be more excited to represent a company that I feel so aligned with. And I want to tell you about two of my favorite products. The first is the veg pre workout. So when I first went vegan, or mostly vegan, the last thing for me to go fully vegan was finding a vegan pre workout that gave me the focus, the energy, and the power that I was looking for. And I can tell you, this is the best pre workout that I've ever had. It gives me incredible focus and energy. And what's probably the best is it leaves me with no crash after I take it, which is great. And the flavors are so freaking good. There's literally peach mango and a Patriot Pop that tastes like, the firecracker popsicles, cherry lemon lime flavor. They're literally so good that I can dry scoop them. And they just released a watermelon flavor for just in time for summer, and it's incredible. So that's the first product. The second product is arguably also my favorite, and that's the plant protein. Comes in 3 incredible flavors: chocolate peanut butter, vanilla ice cream, and cold brew coffee. Yep, you heard me. Cold brew coffee flavor. It tastes incredible, all 3 flavors, 25 grams of protein, fully organic, incredible ingredients, heavy metal tested, and it is my go-to post-workout. Make sure that I'm recovering and refueling and giving my muscles the protein that they need to rebuild for that next workout. So go to vegnutrition.com/dragon and try their full line of supplements, and you'll get 15% off. Or you can just use Dragon at checkout and you'll get 15% off. So that's vegnutrition.com/dragon to get 15% off. Veg Nutrition, live better.
Yeah, this makes me think of this quote that I read from Marianne Williamson that is something along the lines of 2 by 2 we heal. And what I've realized in my own journey is I'm an external processor. So this is why my work with you has been so powerful for me, is because literally it is like dedicated time for me to externally process. And then through kind of the alchemy of our relationship, I'm able to have the breakthroughs and undergo the transformations that will lead me to the next level in any particular area of my life. So I think this might be a good time for us to not switch gears, but segue into kind of some of the work that you've done with me, and kind of unpack our relationship a bit for the audience. Because one of the things that I've discovered in my own journey is that working with coaches and professionals, really in any realm, is probably the most powerful way to have a radical transformation in a much shorter time than kind of trying to let it happen naturally through life and doing it by yourself. Yeah. Now, do transformations happen when people don't work with, coaches or professionals? Absolutely. But oftentimes something incredibly dramatic has to happen in that person's life. Someone, it could be illness or an injury or a death in the family, or, a loss of a job or something. And what I found in my own experience is, like, if I just invest in a professional, I can do a lot of work very quickly and achieve the goals that I want to achieve in a much faster, less collateral damaging way. For example, the podcast that we're currently on. This was a dream probably since about
I want to say 2014, 2013-ish. Basically, whenever Tim Ferriss started his podcast, I was like, oh, I want to do one of these. This is amazing. Like, this is like, oh, God, I want to do. And I told myself for years, like, oh, I'll learn how to do the podcast editing and, I'll just do it myself. And, I told myself that for, 8-9 years. And then I asked myself at the beginning of 2022, what am I going to do different this year so I'm not in the same place that I was the year before and the year before when it comes to some of my deeply held dreams and aspirations, one of them being this podcast. And fortunately at the time, my wife, Carly, who you're very familiar with, suggested that I try working with an EFT coach. And I was like, sounds awesome. Like, I'm down to kind of try anything right now because I'm so fucking sick of saying that I want to have a podcast and year after year, I still don't have it. So Carly suggested that I work with you because she really thought our energies would vibe well. And, I had my hesitations because I knew that your kind of main coaching was the breakup and recovery. And I'm like, well, I'm happily married. I don't need to work, on that stuff. But Carly kind of assured me like, hey, I think if he's open to working with you, he could be incredibly empowering for you. So to kind of set the stage for people, what is EFT? Can you kind of help us as an audience understand exactly what this, emotional freedom technique or EFT is?
Mm-hmm. So emotional freedom techniques is a modality in which I see it as a structured way in which to address our emotions, to identify that. How do I feel about a particular event? Like, for example, I want to start a podcast. Well, I'll ask somebody, well, how do you feel about it? Oh, I feel a lot of fear. Well, one, we've been able to even identify that that's how you feel. Oftentimes we don't know. We just know there's resistance, but resistance is not really an emotion.
Yes.
It's just essentially an emotional block. Well, what is the emotion that's blocking you from being able to have this, be able to start this podcast? And then we locate it in our bodies because emotions and the physical body, to me, is one and the same. They always arise in our actual bodies once we become aware enough. And then we use the modality of emotional freedom techniques to tap on acupressure points on the body. And when we're tapping on these acupressure points, it's like going to acupuncture or an acupressure massage, where it is relaxing our nervous system so that when we're confronting these uncomfortable emotions, we're in a sense letting our nervous system and our body know, hey, it's safe enough to feel these emotions, so that when we actually feel them and speak them out loud and acknowledge them, we're actually processing them and releasing them from our bodies. And that way, when we do feel into these emotions, they no longer have a hold on us, so that when we think about, hey, I'm going to start this podcast, I'm just going to take the very first step, you don't feel the same level of fear anymore.
Yeah. And for somebody like me, this has been an incredible journey in the sense that I would say I'm a very animated person, but very far to the positive side of the spectrum. I resist even feeling kind of the darker, less positive emotions. And part of that is just my own journey and upbringing. Like, my dad is kind of one of the most optimistic, happy-go-lucky people. And I've said this on the podcast before, but I truly believe our souls pick our parents for kind of the lessons and journeys and healing work that our soul wants to do in this lifetime. So I'm not I mean, it was awesome having a dad who was like super positive and, kind of that joyful attitude. But the challenge is there's times in life when things aren't super awesome and happy. And when I was younger, I don't think it took as big of a toll, or maybe it did, but I didn't have so much emotional trauma built up and stored in my body. And now that I'm older and at the age of 40, I'm realizing like when I don't deal with this emotional, whether it be trauma or just like darker emotions that I'm refusing to process, it manifests in physical challenges, whether it's an illness or an injury or stress or the inability to sleep well, or skin conditions like eczema or a rash. And it's like my body is, and there's a book called Your Body Keeps the Score. And I haven't read it, but like the premise of the book, that your body's literally telling you is keeping the score of what's going on is incredibly true for me in my own life. And, it has been this journey where, in sessions, you and I have been working through these emotions, and they'll be like, it's almost like a dam gets broken. And then there's like an outpouring of emotion. And, sometimes that, many times will manifest in like, tears or crying, but literally like I can feel a physical sensation in my body of like emotional release. And it's like so incredible and powerful. And I was laughing when you were like talking about like when Justin's not doing the, the EFT work homework that I told him to do, because it's still very challenging for me to like feel the non-positive emotions. In our last session, like when we worked together, you were like, because I was like, I want to do some, positive affirmations around X, Y, and Z. And like, that really worked for me. And that's kind of like my go-to is like positive affirmations and just affirming the positive and visualization and all the positive stuff. And you're like, yeah, you can do that. But I'd also like you to like take a little bit of time, at least, once a week or so to actually feel the emotions and you were kind of saying like the emotions that you don't want to feel. And I was actually able to do that last week because, in full transparency, I haven't physically felt very, very good for the last few weeks. And it's kind of been this like phantom illness. Like I don't have COVID. I don't have a cough. I don't have a cold. I don't have a temperature, but I just don't feel well. And I was able to use EFT and actually identify the fact that like, even though I feel tired and unwell, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And I was able to like go through that process and tap on the meridians. And I actually was able to like cry and like release that and like, still accept and love myself and be there for myself and give myself the space to actually emote those emotions. And, I've always believed that, emotions are energy that's in motion. And if you don't give it the motion, then it gets stuck. And then that manifests usually in either, physical manifestations within your own body or breakdowns in your life in relationship or finances or other things. So even though I know all of this, it is still very challenging me to like do the work of releasing the non-super optimistic emotions.
Yeah, I would agree too. Even as a coach, this is not something that is intuitive or natural. It's still something that I have to practice doing, like going to the gym. Sometimes I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to lift weights, but it's like a tool like anything else that I have to employ because being in uncomfortable emotions is exactly that. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think what I'm trying to figure out kind of in my own journey, and, one of the reasons I really love working with you is because you create a framework in which I can, explore these things. And you will often kind of give me, guidelines around kind of like number of times per week or what, techniques or tools to use, but you're not like, you don't like freak out if I don't do it perfectly, or I kind of like don't do it, or I go off in my own direction. And what I'm kind of realizing for myself is, or learning from myself, I should say, is kind of what is the cadence and the structure that really works for me in my life, right? Because just like, if any coach were to say like, hey, this is what works for me, this is what you should do, that's like, that's terrible coaching, right? Because it's like, that person just has a radically different life in so many different ways. And so what I really love about the work that you and I do is you create, an opportunity for me to explore, like, okay, here are some ideas, some suggestions. What do you want to do? Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and do those. And then I'm able to kind of explore. And I'm still kind of in the middle of figuring out, like, okay, how often do I do some EFT work to process these non-positive emotions? Is it once a week? Is it daily? Is it only when I feel like I need it? And I think what I'm moving towards is kind of a more intuitive sense of like when I actually need to do it, because life and emotions and challenges is not perfectly linear, right? Like I may go for multiple months where there's not a lot of like big kind of emotional challenges. And then I may go through a month where it's like every other fucking day I'm dealing with some shit. And so the beauty of this to me is that it is bringing me to closer communion with myself and my body and my relationship with both myself and my body. Knowing that my body will give me the signals through, stress or injury or illness when I'm not listening, right? And so what I want to start to figure out for myself is how do I kind of, and this is a growth edge for me, right? Is how do I kind of like make sure that I stay ahead of it, right? So I don't wait till I'm like really not feeling good physically to finally do the work. And I'm still like, don't know what that is, but I'm saying like I'm proactively exploring what that is, because for me, what I found just in my own life is having systems in place that are loosely held. So knowing that like, hey, here's a system that works really well for me, but I know kind of when to go off track or when to really stick to it. And I'm still kind of like figuring all that out for myself. So one of the other things that you have brought up through kind of the talking about EFT and your own work, and then also what I've kind of brought up is this body awareness. So I'm hoping that you could speak a little bit more just about, what is body awareness? And I think one of the angles that I kind of want to look through this, and, we'll probably get to the men's group work, is emotions are hard for men, at least in America, society, I should say the United States of America. Like we are kind of like conditioned to not emote the non-positive emotions except for like anger. It's okay to emote anger, but like sadness, fear, grief, those are not okay for men. So I'm kind of curious, A, how can men start to tap into their own body awareness? And then B, how can men start to learn how to be with these darker emotions or non-super positive emotions in a healthy way?
Yeah, I want to just come back to your own acknowledgement of what you're working on and listening to your own body. And I want to use that as an example, because when I heard you say that you're starting to listen to when things are arising and catching them sooner, I really see that as a moment of empowerment. As in, like, if you decide to never work with me again, I feel that you'd be fully self-empowered to be able to move forward in your journey, because now you have the ability to listen to your own self and not be run by your coping mechanisms of functioning in life. So when you have that, I refer to this as listening to our gut instinct. That a lot of our own wisdom and our own power comes from this gut instinct and following that. And when we veer away from this intuition, then we also inevitably lose our power, but we start doing things that are out of alignment with our authentic self. So that's why I think listening to our bodies is such an important tool to have, because I think that's the difference between living a life that's not our own and a life that is our own, in which in your case, you are living your dream life now because you are listening to your gut instinct. But oftentimes what gets in the way of us actually doing what our gut instinct tells us is our emotions, the things that are holding us back because we have fear, anxiety, sadness around doing those things. And why I think that it's there is because the thing that we're wanting to do is reminding us of things in our past in which we hadn't processed yet. Right. You may have, let's say, wanted to do something that's like a podcast or put yourself out there in the world, let's say in a general sense, but you may have been shamed for doing it, or you failed and someone acknowledged and said, like, yeah, this is what happens, Justin, when you try to take a risk. Like, this is just an example. And that's what prevents me from listening to my gut instinct, because I don't want to have to experience that thing that happened to me. And because I hadn't processed the fear or worry or anxiousness around it, my body is telling me unconsciously, don't do that thing again, Leo, because you're going to feel these feelings. But in our conscious mind, we actually have the ability to experience these emotions and not have those be the thing that drives our life. We're actually collaborating with our emotions, not in a sense saying we never want to feel uncomfortable emotions, is that we are accepting and welcoming our emotions, because that's part of being whole. That's part of being authentic. That when we welcome and accept them, that becomes part of our journey of moving forward and growing into our fullest potential, as opposed to getting in the way of us meeting our potential. And so to answer your question, how do men do that more? My view is that men need to be more in relationship with one another. Like, actually make the decision and commitment that I want to have relationships, deep, meaningful relationships with other men. Let's start there first. If you have that commitment and desire, then there is going to be more of the impetus to want to know other men and be there for other men. And so just by showing up that way, I think other men will then feel the trust and safety that, hey, this man has my back. I am going to show more of my weakness and vulnerability to them because they actually care. Now, that happens most easily and actively in a men's group, in my opinion. And in particularly in the way that our men's groups are set up. They are weekly and they're committed groups. So people don't just drop in and show up for a week or two and then maybe come back in a month. Every man shows up every week. And that consistency is already telling other men, hey, I care about you enough that I'm going to put 3 hours a week aside to be here no matter what. And that creates the container for men to then feel that, oh, I'm being held in this container it's strong, I can break down, show my weaknesses, show my vulnerabilities, express these uncomfortable emotions, and be able to get through to the other side because someone is there on the other side for me week after week after week. And so we have an opportunity to connect as men, not just through our work, through our achievements, through shared experiences. We do it also by showing each other that we love and care about each other, that we all experience similar pains in life too, and that it's okay to connect with other men in this way. In fact, it feels a lot more whole and authentic when we get to see also this side of each other.
Yeah, I'm both deeply excited by this idea and deeply scared because I felt called for probably the last couple of years now, and this is something I've mentioned to Carly, is like, I either want to start a men's group or I want to join a men's group or both. And it hasn't happened yet. And I'll tell you what excited me was the container and the opportunity to be vulnerable with other men in a way that isn't tied to work or achievements, because I feel like most men, that's kind of most of our relationships with other men are built around work and achievement, at least in my own case. And so when I connect with men, which I would say I'm very fortunate in that I've nurtured a lot of male relationships over the last several years. So I have both friends, peers, colleagues that are, in similar or different careers, in industries, as well as, developing male mentors. And we're able to talk about, all aspects of life. And that is really beautiful. The thing that scared me about what you brought up was the 3-hour commitment, because I'm like, fuck, and that's like committed every week, because I'm like, I don't even know how I'd fit that in, like, into my life right now. But obviously, as somebody who works out, pretty religiously, usually 6 days a week, like, you fit in whatever's important to you. So I know that. But that kind of commitment is super scary to me, right? I'm like, oh, fuck, 3 hours every week, like, committed, like, sounds awesome, but it sounds really hard, and, like, I don't know if I'm ready, and da-da-da-da-da. So I'm curious, both for myself and for the audience, in that weekly meetup, if you can share, what are kind of some of the things that would happen? If someone was like, okay, it sounds interesting, like, what the hell happens every week for 3 hours?
I would say in my groups, there's 2 distinct sections of these 3-hour meetings. One of them is called open space, and the other one's called open sharing. So in open space, so here we're sitting all in a circle, and in open space, this is an opportunity to speak your truth to another man or reveal the truth that's happening inside of your mind, like reporting your mind, essentially. And this is a relational dialogue with other people. Instead of sharing about my story, this is what's happening to me, this is what's going on. Here I'm in direct relationship with the other men that are in the room. So here you may share with them, hey, something you said last week really triggered me. Like, I feel really pissed off about that. I want to clear that with you because I feel like I'm not in connection with you anymore. So here's a moment to work through conflict with another man in a closed container and to get to the other side of it, so that we're not harboring resentments towards each other and feeling like we need to compete or shut somebody out because they did something that could be a total assumption or misinterpretation. And so these men get to resolve conflict as opposed to avoid conflict with one another, which is often what has men disconnected from one another. Right. And this person may be also, if someone has a conflict with me, they may be pointing out a shadow or a blind spot that I have that I don't even know. Like, oh, I don't even know that I do that to men. This is my unconscious way of pushing men away by saying or doing these types of things.
Yeah.
It's also an opportunity to acknowledge other men. Saying something nice or appreciating another man can also be very vulnerable. Like, to let them know that I care about you is not something we always voice. And that is also another thing that brings men closer to one another, to know that you actually feel this way towards me.
Yeah.
So that's what open space is bringing the truth forward and directly finding ways in which we are avoiding relationship with men and then actively connecting with one another. And then the second half is usually dedicated to open sharing, where there's usually 3 or 4 men who have things in their life that they want feedback on, or they want to simply vent because they have no other space. Like you yourself, you're an external processor. This is the space where I can actually say what's true for me. There's some dark thoughts. There's some things that I'm not exactly proud of for saying, but these are actually what's happening inside of me.
Yeah.
And there's a space for you to say it. And sometimes that section is also a place for men to call out our bullshit and let them know, hey, actually you're not owning up to something here, or you're not being accountable for this thing that you're talking about. And so these spaces are not just to express your emotions, they're also to hold each other accountable and taking action in life.
Yeah. So love that format. Question: how many people are typically in a men's group? And obviously you can speak from your own experience is the first question. And then kind of the follow-up question is, what are the pros and cons of an in-person versus a virtual?
So the organization I'm with is called Arka Brotherhood, ARKA Brotherhood, arkabrotherhood.com. And so they have online groups called Ronin squads, and there's in-person squads, which are in North America right now currently. And so the Ronin ones, they max out at 10, and their meetings are only 2 hours because there's usually a bandwidth with being in front of my computer, and 2 hours is like, that's the limit.
Yeah.
And so there's 10 men in those groups. And then in the in-person, it can range anywhere from 10 to 15. So currently I have 15 men in my group. Any more often feels like the container's too large. It's less intimate. There's not enough time to really go deep and connect in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sweet spot is 12. And the difference between the two, well, when you're just like, if I was having this conversation with you in person, there's just a different energy when we're both in the same room together.
Yeah.
We feel things that we can't necessarily feel over Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the convenience of Zoom also can be amazing too, because we get to still have the other things in our lives that are just as meaningful and important. And those things feed into the life just as men's work feeds into those other things as well. So it's really just the choice and what's available. If you can do one in person, of course, I would say go for that. But otherwise, online works for a lot of people too.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to figure out if there was a Arka Brotherhood group in their area, do they just go to the website and do a search, or how does that work?
Yes. So if you go on the website, there's a button that says join, and then it'll ask what city, and there'll be a drop-down menu of all the cities that's available to them.
Gotcha. And then what if someone, in my own case, like let's say there isn't one here, and I wanted to start my own, does Arka Brotherhood facilitate, someone starting their own group?
Yeah, so what happens is the typical pathways, if someone joins a Ronin squad, like an online group, the ultimate aim is for those men to eventually start their own in-person groups in their location. So people have already started doing that. So my recommendation is start online. See if you even resonate with the culture of Arca Brotherhood. And if you have felt, wow, there really has been a transformation within you, you will feel that natural desire to want to start one in your own community.
Yeah. I love that. Awesome. So I want to circle back just a little bit because we kind of covered it, but not in depth. And I just want to use myself as a bit of an example of how people can utilize a coach to work through the blocks on a dream. So, kind of using myself as a bit of an example, what some of the work, and, of course, I'm going to have selective memory for because we've been working together for almost a year now, which is actually pretty amazing to realize that time flies. But one of the things that I was unaware of when we started our work together is that I had a subconscious fear of being seen as being more successful or more happy or living kind of a more thriving life than my family. And that by having a podcast, I would be broadcasting very brightly or loudly in the world kind of the levels of both personal happiness, dream goal realization, as well as success. And there's was a deep-rooted fear that if I outshine, my family, they'll disown me. And that fear of, being cut out of the pack is like a primal fear. Humans are literally programmed to want to maintain connection to the tribe. But I didn't even realize any of that was there until we started doing the work together and starting to unpack these emotions. And then as I started to, release all those emotions around that, I was able to start to recognize ultimately, my family wants me to be successful and happy. And if I'm, the relation to whatever happiness or success that they have in their own life is inconsequential. It does not matter. Because if somebody, a family member, truly loves me, they want me to live my best life, whatever that, manifests as. But that was all so buried in me, that I just kept making up the excuses, I'll do it eventually. And to me, the power of working with a coach is they're able to help you become aware of how you're holding yourself back, blocking yourself, and self-sabotaging yourself. And it is really hard to see those parts yourself because they're literally your blind spots. And I'm just going to pause there and ask you to kind of weigh in kind of on your experience of me as a client.
Yeah, I love that you are very transparent about this whole process. And I do remember when you first came to me for your very first session, you had this long list of all of these things that you wanted to work on. And these were essentially your goals. And I was super excited to work with you because I knew that you were hungry and that you were wanting change. But as you already spoke to, these are things that you want to go and achieve in your life. But this is really just the on the surface. These are all the things that are happening for you. But underneath all of that is the subconscious, the things we don't know. And so in my view, when we're coaching, I'm helping you bring all of the things that are unconscious into the conscious. And I don't think it took very long for us to uncover that there was some limiting beliefs. That's the term I often use, core limiting beliefs. That at the very core, this is the limiting belief that if I do X, Y, Z, this and this will happen. That permeates not just in your work life, but I'm imagining in various different realms of your life as well. That if we process and work through the emotions surrounding that core limiting belief, which is often created earlier in our lives, that limiting belief is no longer the thing in which you see the world. It doesn't limit you anymore. That you have an opportunity to change that limiting belief. But my view is we can't just tell our minds, okay, I no longer believe this about the world. I want to have this new belief. That we actually have to work through on an emotional and physiological level where that limiting belief comes from, why we even have that belief, when was it created, and only have we worked through the emotions surrounding that, can we then start to create a new belief. So I saw us really working through a lot of the emotions around that limiting belief, and this is why you have a podcast. This is why you are currently a coach, because that, in my view, is your true potential.
Yeah.
You just weren't given the tools to work through that belief when you were younger around who you are and who you're meant to be in this world.
Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. Today's show is brought to you by Fit Rich Vegan. If you're ready to get in the best shape of your life, double your income, and 10x your savings and investments, then this is the coaching program for you. But wait a minute, Dragon. Isn't this your coaching program? Heck yeah, it is. I spent the last 8 years mastering my fitness and my finances, and I've built an incredible coaching program with an incredible team to help you get the body of your dreams and finally achieve that level of financial success that you've been seeking. So if you want to find out if you're a good fit for the program, go to fitrichvegan.com and book your free consultation today. Or you can just DM me on Instagram with the words FitRichVegan, and we can chat about if it's going to be a good fit for you. I'm committed to empowering people to actually achieve their fitness and financial goals. I spent the last 20 years trying to figure this out on my own. And what I realized is the key to doing it is not doing it alone. You have to have coaches, you have to have mentors, and you have to be a part of masterminds. And that's exactly what Fit Rich Vegan has. It has coaches, mentors, and it is a mastermind. So again, if you're ready to book your free consultation today, go to fitrichvegan.com or drop me a DM on Instagram.
Yeah. And one of my core beliefs now is, and it's actually been this way for a while, but I'm stepping into my own proactive action within this belief. And that is that humans are literally meant to do this work together. Like together we learn faster, we heal faster, we grow faster, and we transform faster. And it's like so much more fun. And, in addition to faster, when we do the work together. And doing the work together can come in so many different forms. And, the kind of coaching relationship that I have, working with you as my coach is one example. Being a part of a men's group is another example. Being a part of a mastermind group is another example, which, that's been another kind of key part of my own growth journey, is being in different masterminds that are focused on different kind of areas that I want to kind of unleash and level up. So one of the other pieces that I really want to cover for you or cover with you is just, we talked off air before we hit record, and that is the conscious relationship and attachment theory. And when you brought that up as like one of the areas that you're really interested in, I immediately was like, oh yes, I want to talk about that, because I'm recognizing, particularly in business, I will recreate the same relationships or relationship archetype or persona or personality between myself and another person, and I've repeated it at least like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times in different business endeavors. And so I kind of want to understand or contextualize, like, A, why do we do that? And B, how do we transcend that?
Can you give me a snippet of what this archetype is, and what is your dynamic with this type of archetype?
Getting raw and vulnerable here. So
okay.
I'm going to have to like kind of barf it out a little bit, because I this is kind of the first time I'm talking about it. What I noticed that I will do with like a business partner is, or a colleague, is I will create this scenario where I can't truly be the best business partner or fully committed because I have these other challenges in my life. Like, for example, some drama will happen with my family, or there's some other circumstance in my life that allows me to only be like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, or partially committed, or maybe 2 feet in, but I'm still like holding an arm on the other side. Like I'm almost like holding myself back from fully being expressed within that business or that business relationship, or both the business and the relationship. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense.
And I have an inkling of kind of like where it comes from, but I'm just kind of, and I can share if that would be helpful. But what I'm noticing, kind of a more like high level thing, is it's this repeating kind of like victim mentality. Like, well, I have the potential to be incredibly successful and an incredibly great business partner, but I'm victim of X, Y, and Z circumstance. So I can be good, but I can't be great. Does that make sense?
Well, why don't I share with you what conscious relationship is from the book that I'm studying?
Sure.
Because it's not my own concept, and see if it applies to this particular archetype.
Sure.
And we'll go from there. So this comes from the book Getting the Love You Want. So when we talk about conscious relationship, it's particularly in the realm of romantic love, but I think it can apply in any particular scenario. It's just most profound and transformative in that context. And that Harville Hendrix, who is the author of this book, his theory is that we are attracted to people who are like our caregivers, both in the positive and negative sense. So in the romantic love stage, we are attracted to them, and we're in this beautiful dream with them because they are embracing all of the positive aspects of our parents. And they're starting to meet all of our needs and do all of the things that even our parents weren't able to give us. And so we feel like our life is whole and complete. So there's this like immediate attraction, love at first sight. But then there comes a point where we enter into the second stage, which is the power struggle. And that often happens when there's a new level of commitment. Maybe in your case, maybe you've signed the business contract, or maybe now you've started to invest more money into your business. And so for people that are in romantic connections, it's when they get married or when they decide to be exclusive. that instead of projecting the image of our parents in a positive sense, now we see all of the negative traits of our parents. And in that switch, it can be confusing for a lot of people because they're like, well, what the hell happened? We had such a amazing bond initially. Now you're this like, evil person that I just want to avoid, or like we're always getting into these power struggles with one another. And he believes that we get into these relationships because there's an unconscious part of our brain that seeks people out like this because we have an opportunity to heal our childhood wounds and come into wholeness by working together in this form of conscious relationship and release ourselves of the repressed parts of our nature. For example, if someone grew up being shamed for expressing their emotions, that's a repressed part of me. I feel like, I can't express my emotions. It's not safe to. If I do, I'm going to be shamed for being expressive. And so I go forward into my life not really being able to be vulnerable. If someone else is expressing deep, uncomfortable emotions, I'm going to deflect them because it's something that's repressed in me. So I'm going to always attract somebody that is very emotionally expressive, that wants to emotionally connect with me. And initially, I'll find that really exciting. I'll be like feeling like somebody, like I'm finally being able to express myself. But there'll come a point in the power struggle where it starts to become too intimate. They're asking too much of me. I start to hit my growth edge, my limiting beliefs. In that moment, I'll have the opportunity to choose, this is where I can step into relationship with them and start to liberate my own repression, start to become more expressive, because this is what they're asking from me. This is what they're wanting from me. Or I can continue the power struggle and blame and criticize them for being, you're just too emotional. You're not being logical enough. You just need to work on yourself a little bit more. And so why conscious relationship is so challenging is because the people that we get into relationship with, they are asking of something from me that is most difficult for me to give to them. So when you hear all of this, does this resonate for you in terms of your business relationships?
Yeah, you're literally blowing my mind because now I'm starting to see it not like what the hell's going on with my business relationships and how that's related to my parents. And again, I'm going to repeat, I said this at the top of the episode, but like I really do believe our souls choose our parents to do the work that we're meant to do in this life. So I'm not blaming my parents whatsoever. So I'm sure they'll probably listen to the show. I love you both. I'm grateful for the work that I get to do with you, but I'm like, holy fucking shit. I'm seeing so my dad left for a period of my childhood, right? So these business partners that I've chosen in the past, they're like so excited to fully commit to me. And that's like the beauty, right? Then I get in this power struggle with them where I don't want to fully commit to them. And I start behaving like the darker side of like that experience of my father leaving and not being committed to being a father because he kind of disappeared for a few years. And that wound is like I'm recreating like power dynamics in order to liberate that repression that needs to come up for healing. And I'm just like, this is fucking crazy. So like I'm having this is like insane. I'm like, okay, cool. It's like nothing to do with a business partner and everything to do with me and my own stuff that I need to heal.
Yes.
And then as you were saying this, I'm recognizing the growth edge that my marriage is pulling me towards to do the healing work around the repression that I have kind of in like an intimate romantic sense. And I'm like, holy fuck, like as I'm doing this, I'm like, I got to book some more sessions with Leo. like that's what I'm like, it's going through my head. Because, we're not going to solve this on this podcast, but I appreciate you being willing to go down through this, because it is my hope that the listeners will be like, oh shit, I see this recurring pattern of relationships, whether it be in your intimate relationships or in your work relationships, that you just keep repeating. Like you keep picking work colleagues or a boss that keeps creating the same power dynamic struggle, or kind of like, as I said, this kind of like personality to the relationship. And then you will do the same thing in your intimate relationships as well. And so this is incredibly fascinating. And I don't even want to necessarily attempt to solve this in a podcast, but I'm just curious, in your own experience or your experience working with others, what are some of the steps to start to do that healing work? If you can go into that. Again, I'm not asking for us to solve this here, but I'm just like, okay, cool, I've identified it. What are some next like steps to start working through it?
Well, if let's say we were to look at it from the perspective of you already being in relationship, I think that having the conversation with the person that you're in relationship to is a really good first step.
I love that.
Yeah, because it's likely that the other person is also functioning from an unconscious place. And they're wondering, well, why am I also in this power struggle?
Yeah.
Because they've also attracted you for their own healing and growth as well, that they have something on the other side. And so that if you can both see that we're both in this power struggle and we want to work on this consciously now, then you're committing to a whole other level of not just the business or the marriage that you're in, but you're committing now to both of your own personal healing and recovering your wholeness. And when that container is created, then all kinds of amazing things move into place, because now we're no longer functioning from the unconscious.
Yeah.
For those that are not in a relationship, and we're like looking back at, oh, why do I keep attracting this person again and again and again? You may feel shame, but to feel some sense of compassion for ourselves, that we attract these people not because we're bad or wrong. It's just that we grew up with certain circumstances that has us attracting these people because we want to actually grow. And that when we were going through it, we were just unconscious. We didn't know. But now that we do know, it's coming back to what you were saying, the gut instinct, or what you're working through is coming back to our own gut instinct and listening to ourselves again, so that the listening is actually coming into our conscious selves. So I think just the awareness is already enough. The tools we can go into maybe at another time, but I just want to start there.
Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. This show is brought to you by Feel Free from Botanic Tonics. This product is unlike anything I've ever had before. No joke. It's made with kava root and other ancient plants, and just half a shot gives me this incredible sense of focused flow and productivity. And I love to take just half a shot right before I work out. I take it with my pre-workout, and it takes my workouts to the next level. It is seriously unlike anything I've ever had. It's also an incredible productivity tool for any big work projects that you have, or long periods of time where you just need to be super focused in flow state and get a lot of shit done. So if you want to give this a shot, you can go to botanictonics.com and use code DRAGON at checkout to get 40% off your first order. No joke, 40% off with code DRAGON. That's Feel Free
from botanictonics.com, code DRAGON. Feel free, feel good.
Yeah, and what I think I'd like to do is invite you to come back on the podcast again in the future. And, kind of in my view, it's after we've done some of this work together in a private setting, because one of my goals has always been to be a lighthouse for others in their own kind of learning, healing, growing, and transforming journey. And the way that I feel most authentic doing that is by sharing my own journey and all the struggles and healing and breakthroughs that happen. So, I want to put that on the table if you're open to it, and we can follow up in a few months after you and I have done some personal work on Dragon. And then secondly, I just wanted to see if there were kind of any other last topics or words of wisdom or things that you would like to mention before we start to shut this down.
Is there any particular theme or predominant struggle that you notice your clients, your audience is recurring in their journey that I could maybe bring my own advice or wisdom around?
Yeah, and of course, it's the same thing I struggle with is kind of the dual, I'm not enough, I'm not doing enough. Because I think overachievers and, people who sign up for my coaching program, they're achievers. They're people who want to, achieve more success. And I'll speak for myself, I'm kind of a overachiever, and I know through my work with you and other work that I've done that a lot of that is driven by like this subconscious belief that I'm not enough and I'm not doing enough. So, and I know humans in general really struggle with this. So I think this is kind of a great place for us to get your thoughts on this. And it's, probably a really great last subject for us to cover.
Yes, great. So this is where I would cycle back to the selves model. So I'll definitely share that with you after we get off of here.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also an overachiever. I suffer from perfectionism. And it sounds like, oh, you're just a perfectionist. Like, how bad can it actually be? But I really do feel like it's a difficult way of approaching life, being a perfectionist, because we can never be enough for ourselves.
Yep.
And I won't go into why it's there, but the overachieving, I think on the surface, it looks like a really great thing to have because we achieve a lot. We get to experience all of these amazing things from our success. But internally, it's not a pleasant place to reside because we can't actually enjoy our lives and be grateful for what we experience. And so first, I'd like to say that there's nothing necessarily wrong with striving, doing, or being ambitious for those that really want that. It's, for me, learning how to have a balance with that. And the balance on the other side of it is self-compassion. But before I go there, why we experience this perfectionism or this overachieving to the extent where it's unhealthy is that we are striving to become this ideal self. And whether that's because of our parenting or society saying, hey, this is the ideal self that we want to achieve and strive to become, we always fail to never be ideal because we're human beings. We can never be an ideal, that we actually just become who we currently are, which is our actual self, which is below the standard of the ideal. And so because we're always striving to become this ideal person, we fall into this cycle of self-hate because we never meet that expectation that was placed on us as we were growing up and developing. And so the symptoms of that from this model is we numb ourselves, we have illness, depression, addiction, or isolation. When you experience that in life, perhaps you may be on that cycle of self-hate where you're trying to be an ideal and never reaching it and falling short of it. So we hate ourselves for it. And so the remedy of that is self-compassion. And when I first heard and learned about self-compassion, I'm sure everyone knows what that is and the Buddhist concept. And like, at first I just poo-poo it. I'm like, yeah, of course, just like accept yourself, love yourself, great. But like, how do I achieve the ideal self? Like, how do I just like love myself so that I can get exactly what I want? And I'm starting to really sit in the depth and peace of self-compassion. And self-compassion is accepting myself as I am and all of that I am. And the tools that they say are important is breath, awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance, action, and appreciation. That we can actually actively be compassionate, not just to ourselves, but to other people. And here in that experience, I'm connecting to someone's humanity, to their weakness, to their joy, to their success, their struggles, all of them. And so not only do I feel a deeper connection with myself, I feel a deeper connection to people. Whereas before, in the other way of living, the overachieving, the perfectionism, I really do feel like I'm living life all alone. That I have to go through the struggle all by myself. Why is everybody else achieving what they want, and I'm not able to? It's a life of shame for me. And so it's the balance between being and doing. That it is important to do things out in the world, to achieve, to take action, to make a difference. But it's equally important to simply be with people, be there for people. And in that cycle, then we are in touch more and more with our authentic self, as opposed to striving further away from it to become our ideal self.
It's so powerful. And one note is a realization as you were saying that the EFT practice of, in my own example in the last few days, literally saying to myself, even though I feel like tired and unwell, it was allowing me to have deep self-compassion and to literally just be with who I am right now, right in that moment, versus like experiencing the gap between who I am right now and that ideal self. And that was, for me, a powerful insight that I just received through this conversation, and then an experiential process that I had with the tapping. Because it was like, I was like, hey, I do love myself. I do accept myself as I am right now, even though, my ideal self would be crushing the gym and like doing all these things and have tons of energy 24/7. And this is just such an incredible, powerful idea or ideological construct for people to understand, because so many people suffer from perfectionism. And you're right, you do feel very alone when you're kind of on that hamster wheel, because now more so than ever with things like social media, there's always somebody doing what you want to do, and they're infinitely farther along than you are. So I think that is a really great place for us to wrap this up. The last thing to just mention to people is your work with Breakup and Recovery. So on that, who is that for? What type of people, or what situations are people in for if they were to reach out to you for that? And then where would they find you online if they did want to connect with you?
So my work is certainly for people who are experiencing a breakup, let's say within the last year. But even if you experienced a breakup many years ago, like myself, I hadn't really grieved that relationship and was still either numb or distracted in my life and not really been able to break through that shell of a being. that if you feel like your breakup is still impacting you, then this work is really recovering your true authentic self again. And you can find me predominantly on Instagram, Breakup Recovery Leo, and or on my website, breakuprecoverycoach.com.
Awesome. Well, Leo, I got some work cut out to do with you, which I'm super excited about because it's just another layer of learning, healing, growth, and transformation that I get to go through with you. And I'm so grateful to have you in my life. And I'm so deeply honored that you were willing to come on to my podcast and dig into some of the work that we've been doing together, because you really have been an instrumental character in my dream life, me living my best life. And you're such an empowering figure. And to be able to share that with the audience, to showcase that, like, you don't do this alone, right? I didn't achieve this dream because I had the gumption to just go do it myself. Like, I had a lot of help, from you, from my wife, and from other people in my life. And so I just really want to, deeply thank you for your time, your energy, your insight, your wisdom that you brought to this show. B, like, times 10 or 100 for the work that you've done with me personally. And then lastly, just being willing to be open about what you and I have done in such a public setting. So thank you for coming on the show, brother.
Thank you. I'm just going to take a moment to receive all of that because it's really meaningful to hear that from you. Thank you. Thank you for this podcast and this opportunity. And I look forward to seeing you at our next session.
Awesome. And round 2 of this, after we do some more work on these ridiculous relationship personalities that I keep repeating. So thanks, Leo.
All right. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks for tuning in. And remember, literally everything can be used as an opportunity to learn, to heal, to grow, and to transform. So whatever is going on in your life, choose to consciously and proactively harness that energy and use it to alchemize your life to the next level. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or on your favorite social media and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. As always, you can find me at Justin David Carl on Instagram and all the socials, as well as at alchemizelife.com on the web. Until the next time, sending you lots of energy and plenty of dragon magic.